Mr. Vasadze, good evening.
Good evening.
Gamarjoba.
Gamarjoba again, that's all.
Thank you so much to take a few minutes of your time to answer the questions of TV Liberté.
Thank you for inviting me.
Your contribution has been one of the most remarked at this Eurasian Congress organized these days in Chisinau, the capital of the Moldovan Republic. So first I would like to ask about your general impressions about this event.
I think it's a wonderfully managed and planned conference. It is always very refreshing when we come together in smaller groups, because large forums and large congresses have their pluses and minuses. But in a relatively small but intense group of international intellectuals, the discussion is always deeper and more meaningful than in huge halls with thousands of people. So I profoundly enjoyed participation in the conference, and I'm very grateful to Yuri Roshka, who has invited me, my old friend, to come to Moldova.
And now a question which might at first sight seem personal, but in the present European context, maybe it will very soon lead us to much more general considerations. You are known to be the father to 8 children. How do you feel as the father of 8 in contemporary Europe, where I think it has been noticed that of last more than 8 chief of state in the European Union had no children at all?
Well, I grew up in a Soviet period, and the standard Soviet family was 1 or 2 children. I have 1 sister, my wife has 1 brother, and it was quite common for Georgians, Russians, in Soviet period to have 1 or 2 children. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and after the renaissance of faith and religion that our countries are undergoing, many families unexpectedly decided to have more and more children as a result of this change. The liberal paradigm is that you need to have money or material means to have many children, which is quite the opposite. In our experience, the more children you have, the easier it is for the family to be together, because it's a society where children help raise each other. The modern tendency of European political leaders, and not just leaders of society, to be childless is very alarming and very negative. And this needs to change, because Europe is suffering from declining fertility rates, and in the absence of some fundamental ideological renewals, if you want, human being is a slave to the fear of the future. He or she thinks that the main hope for the future is the amount of money he saves in the bank. And the more he saves, the less children he has, and the more he relies on this individualistic liberal paradigm. And more he finds himself or herself in solitude. And the only answer and the only therapy from that is to break free from this slavery, because it's the other way around. When you make a step towards family, when you make a step towards a non-material value, you immediately receive many gifts, including material gifts, which help you support this.
You have come to this place coming from Budapest, where you also participated in a congress of was it called the Congress of Conservatives?
World Congress of Families.
Families, yes. But I've heard the word conservative during your contribution, and I know wherever the American right is represented, that word is expected to be widely used.
Yeah.
But if we think of the actual meaning of that word, maybe it's false. Maybe we should have the courage to assume our positions in given situations as reactionary. The problem, of course, would be the negative connotation which mainstream discourse has attached to the term reactionary. What do you think?
Well, I think it depends on from which window you are looking outside, from which viewpoint you are taking a look. If you take a look at the truth from the standpoint of entire history of mankind, you will see that this is the most tragic period, because 45 million people, 45 million children are killed every year in their mother's wombs, and that's called the choice of a woman. Child's biggest trauma is separation of parents. The world collapses, and so the ideology which kills more children than both world wars or all the religious wars combined, which makes unhappy more children than any other ideology in the history of mankind, is contradictory to be called the most humane ideology, as the least humane ideology, hiding behind the flag of freedom of choice. So we are not reactionaries, we are normal. And calling the desire to have a wife and children marginal or radical is reactionism and is radicalism.
I was also very sensible to something you said during your contribution here in Chisinau about cities and villages. As you know, France, unfortunately, is very well known of last globally due to the very numerous, frequent declarations of kind of self-proclaimed representative of France, the so-called philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy, who recently, well, maybe not that recently, maybe 3 years ago or something, at some meeting in Ukraine, declared that Europe equals the love of cities. So I thought that maybe you would have an answer for Mr. Lévy.
I think he's right, because I don't like Europe as a word. Europe was a very trustworthy young girl who was hijacked and raped. And this prophecy is coming to life, unfortunately, in our lifetime. As a very ancient Caucasian, I have a little bit of an ironic relation to the word Europe, because I have an ironic relationship to the whole Hellenic tradition of kidnapping golden fleece from Colchida. So my subject of love is not Europe. My subject of love is French culture, or German culture, or Dutch culture, and the tradition of countries which are called European countries. And to me, what your self-proclaimed philosopher states is very symbolic. I call them Homo urbanicus hedonicus. These are people who are born and raised in the cages of concrete with separated parents and broken hearts since childhood. Maybe they haven't even seen the beauty of French rural tradition, of how the Frenchman makes wine or cheese, or how he sees the beauty of rural France. And to me, urbanization equals destruction of family, destruction of peace of mind, and de-urbanization equals being closer to nature, being closer to normality. I'm not saying, I don't want to sound like a fanatical radical, and I understand the beauty of the city. I was born and raised in the capital of Georgia myself, but there is no other place that I have harder time sleeping in than the city, and there is no other place where I want to be with my family than away from the city. So if 20th century was the century of chaotic, aggressive industrialization and urbanization. If we want to prolong the life of humanity, we need to somehow turn 21st century into the reverse vector of de-urbanization. We need to re-inhabit our God-given beautiful lands of France and Georgia, and if we don't do it, other people who love land more than we do will inhabit those lands, will multiply, and we will be left hostage to the matrix in which we are living.
Mr. Vasadze, thank you.
Thank you very
so
much. I appreciate the interview.